Israel is bombarding civilians, women and children without discrimination, and this time it hit Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. We know that at least 20 people, including 5 journalists, lost their lives in the attack. The number of starvation-related deaths has risen to 300.
The Israeli army, which pressed the button for the full-scale occupation of Gaza, continues its attacks uninterruptedly. This time the target was Nasser Hospital in the southern city of Khan Yunis. The building was first targeted with an IED attack. A journalist lost his life in the first attack. Civil defense teams then arrived at the scene. They were trying to remove the body of the journalist and rescue the wounded. Journalists were also there to document the events. Meanwhile, the second attack took place. The moment was caught on camera for seconds. Journalists and civil defense teams trying to report the massacre to the world also lost their lives. Many others wounded. Turkey's reaction to the attack was swift. President Burhanettin Duran, head of communications, once again targets freedom of the press and human values in the shadow of genocide amidst the painful cries of innocence was taken, he said. He said that Israel is under the delusion that it can prevent the truth from being made public through systematic attacks on journalists, with no regard for any country. The Israeli army is preparing to launch ground attacks in Gaza City as part of its full-scale occupation plan and has stepped up airstrikes in the region. Zaytun, the largest neighborhood in Gaza City, as well as Sabra and Jabalia areas are targeted.
We will not leave our land. We will die today or tomorrow, but we will die on our land.
Gazans are struggling to survive in the shadow of aid, but they are also struggling with hunger. Since October 2023, the number of starvation-related deaths has risen to 300. 117 of them were children. So is hope for a ceasefire completely dead? Last week, Hamas accepted an offer of a 60-day ceasefire and the release of half of the 20 hostages believed to be alive. There has been no response from the Tel Aviv leadership. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will no longer accept a partial agreement and has called for a comprehensive deal that would lead to the release of all Israeli prisoners, that they are in favor of an agreement. Analysts in the Israeli press also believe that Netanyahu has no intention of ending the war. Israel's Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, who has opposed the full-scale occupation of Gaza from the beginning, is in favor of a ceasefire agreement. Zamir was quoted as saying that there is an agreement on the table and we must accept it.
Iran's strategic threat to Israel.
Yes, now, let's talk about what is happening in the world, especially in the Middle East. Dr. Errol Gützler, professor at Altenbasch University and president of Aslan, is with us. Errol Hoja, hello, good night. Welcome, Zina.
Thank you, sir. Have a good broadcast.
Thank you very much. Now we have just watched the news. The first issue is that Israel killed 6 journalists. 6 people were journalists in Nasser Hospital. About 20 people lost their lives. On the one hand, of course, the deaths continue due to hunger and famine in Gaza. We already know the scene in Gaza. It is the end of the line. There is no more comment that can be made about Gaza, no more expression that can be used. We have exhausted them all. Now there is a complete occupation plan. Will it continue like this from now on? Where will it end? Targeting hospitals is something that should not have happened in the first place, but if you remember, right after October 7th, they were targeting ambulances with wounded people in them. He said there was Hamas inside. There is no end to the strange excuses. Here, sir, let's comment.
Please, sir. Thank you. Of course, there is an illusion of perception. I want to underline this. Israel has pushed the button for invasion. It is preparing for a full invasion and so on. This is not true, sir. Look, this is an illusion of perception. Israel does not have the ground forces to control Gaza. The ability of the Israeli army to take control of Gaza It is technically and militarily impossible for it to completely occupy and dominate all its points. So it does not have such power. Let's underline this. And of course, the Turkish media is an open source because the press services from outside are expressing this as information. And it is as if we are unknowingly directing and conducting Israeli propaganda. Look, this is not possible. Look, what does Ayaz Amir say? He says, make a deal. That is, he says, let's not do this occupation. Why? Because he knows they can't do it. I mean, I have explained this many times on television. Israel can even enter an area of 360 kilometers with its land force, and there is a permanent upper establishing regions. It is out of the question for them to consolidate these permanent bases and form small garrisons. Look, we understand that this is out of the question from the practice of the 22-month-long war, from the reality on the ground. Just now, for example, Ms. Mine, you mentioned it. Zaytun neighborhood. Look, they could not capture the Zaytun neighborhood. Zaytun neighborhood is such a critical place that if Zaytun neighborhood is captured, the road to Gaza opens. The Israeli army could not enter Gaza city center. So in such a situation, with 60,000 reservists, will the Israeli army invade Gaza? It can't, and it will not be easy. I mean, when they enter there, yes, they enter, but they enter during the day. They have to leave at night. In other words, they cannot establish the upper regions that will make their settlement permanent. They cannot unite them and establish controlled regions. So once again, there is such a military reality on the ground. The fact that they hit this hospital is an indication of this. It is a sign of impotence. That is to say that Hamas and the Qassam Brigades and other resistance organizations have not been able to hold Hamas and the Qassam Brigades and other resistance organizations in decisive battles on the ground. Impenetrable. Israel can't bend their ankles, so they go and hit hospitals, and they don't treat civilians anymore. They treat civilians now. And it is hitting hospitals which are perhaps the last place for their lives. Look, he hopes to benefit from this, so I have been saying it from the beginning. I have been saying it since this news first came out, and I will continue to say it. Israel cannot occupy Gaza, sir. In its current state, you can see that it is making incursions. It makes some tactical advances and maneuvers, but it cannot be permanent. It cannot establish places where they can stay there permanently, especially at night. Where is the Israeli army now? The Israeli army has surrounded Gaza around the Gaza Strip. Let's go in. Yes, they are entering, but as soon as they enter, they are expelled. The Kastamonu brigades are uprooting them from there. We have seen many examples of this, especially in the Zaytun neighborhood from the very beginning. Since the first months of the war, Beit Hanun, after Beit Lahia, is a very critical place that the Israeli army has been trying to enter and control, but still the Israeli army has not been able to enter and control it. When you cannot achieve this control on the ground, you can bomb from the air as much as you want. So if you don't have areas that you can control with decisive battles, you can't talk about a victory, a success on the ground. Look, it is not possible to talk about a military success. This is all a falsification of perception. Yes, Al-Zamir knows this very well, because Al-Zamir is now being pressured by the rabid Zionist Israeli mind into a conflict that he will lose. He knows he's being asked. He realizes that he has to manage a war that he is going to lose. That's why he wants much more deals from the diplomats there, from the civilian bureaucracy. Why does he want it? Because he knows what will happen. That once he goes in there, it's a dead end for the Israeli army. They know that if they enter with more forces, they will suffer mass casualties. Look, the force that Israel has allocated to Gaza is 140,000 soldiers, 14 divisions. Now, are you going to enter Gaza city center by reinforcing it with 60,000 reserves? It is really impossible. You know, it is very difficult, but what is happening? Unfortunately, there are civilians being massacred there by the despicable Zionist regime, by the desperate regime. If they really have the power, let them come and fight the Qassam Brigades. Already the Qassam Brigades are making them pay a very high price.